Welcome to Navigating Complexity, where we dive into the intricate journeys of entrepreneurs, leaders, and innovators who have faced challenges, pivoted with purpose, and come out on the other side with lessons to share. In today's episode, we're thrilled to have Holly Tachovsky join us, a serial entrepreneur with a remarkable story of perseverance, creativity, and transformation. From carving her path in the startup world to successfully selling build-backs, Holly brings a wealth of insights about finding clarity in chaos, the importance of building with purpose, and the enduring impact of connection. Let's dive into her journey of navigating complexity with grit and grace.
So, good to go?
Yeah.
All right.
We should start by saying that Matt tried to tell me what to wear, and he was like, you should wear something, a solid color that's kind of dark. And I was like, I am not taking fashion advice from someone who, Matt, I have seen him wear 2 different plaids.
But both of which were terrible.
Yeah, and they were like, neither was a good plaid.
Fabrics,
Yeah, so I was like, I don't trust you for fashion.
I love that. That's a great intro to the show.
Yeah.
Welcome to Navigating Complexity, folks. Thanks for coming to the podcast and listening in. Today, we've got a special guest. All our guests are special, but I feel like today's going to be super special.
Yeah.
What about you, Matt?
Yeah, I'm very excited. I've known Holly for a long time, and I've been hoping to get her on here since the get-go.
What I was laughing about is that she had an easy name. So it's Holly Ward, and then she chose to take on another name, Tachovsky, which can also be said in multiple ways, and you actually changed how it's pronounced, or how you who you want to share that story. I thought that was funny.
Oh, so my parents-in-law pronounced the name Holly, or they pronounced it Tachovsky, and I was like, nope, I'm not doing that. I'm going to pronounce it the way the Czechs pronounce it, which to my non-Czech self is Tachovsky. And so I changed it, and they were like, you can't do that. And I said, well, if it's my last name,
I can do it.
I can do it like that. And so
I took that name.
And so I did. Yes. And it is, we've migrated the whole family over now to Tachovsky.
Well, that's what's funny is like your husband now uses it, and now the influence is going to continue. So you're just like,
that's right.
For generations to come.
Exactly.
That's right.
At some point in history books, it's like, where did this name change? Well, it was Holly.
Oh, yeah.
Imagine that.
That would be something else.
Well, thanks for coming on the show. Purpose of the show is, as you know, is just every one of us goes through this complex decisions in our life, right? As far as we go through, we navigate. It's not as easy as like being put in a box. And it's like you go to school and you get your job and you just go forward. There's all these other roads that we can choose. These, for lack of a better word, or maybe even a good word for this, is dimensions, like other dimensions that you can take as you're making these choices. And so as we were discussing guests on the show, Matt said, we got to get Holly on because she's got some interesting things that she's had to decide on. So that's the whole reason we're here. I want to start off by just kind of getting some backstory. Like
Sure.
What did you want to be when you were like 19? And then how did that translate to what you actually did and companies that you sold?
Oh, yeah. What did I want to be? So I have a degree in government.
Okay.
From the University of Tech. Yeah. And the whole time when I was in college, I worked for a venture capitalist, right? Which should have told me something, but right out of college, I got my dream job working for the Speaker of the House in the Texas House, Pete Laney, and I realized that I did not want to do that at all, and then an opportunity came along to start a business, and I was like, oh yeah, let's do that. And so I think that was at maybe 24 or so.
Okay. So government, and what didn't you like about that, or what was this not called?
Okay. So I worked at the Speaker of House when the Monica Lewinsky scandal was going on.
Oh, got it.
And as you can imagine, I was very junior staffer at the time. And so I answered the phones. And the biggest phone call I got was to urge the Speaker of the Texas House to vote or not vote in favor of impeachment or not for Bill Clinton.
Wow.
And so I was like, okay, so you've reached the Texas House of Representatives, and there's like there's local government and there's federal government and all this kind of stuff. I mean, that was maddening. And then it was just I think that actually, if I think about it with this lens now,
right.
It was also very slow moving, and government probably should be slow moving.
Right.
But it didn't have the urgency or pace of a startup. I mean, it couldn't actually be more different.
Right. 100%.
Yeah.
And I was going to, that's the distinction I was going to make is like you went from slow to like fast.
Yeah.
So you were 20, you said 24?
I mean, yeah, early 20s.
So you were looking for just something to move faster, and you weren't expecting that in government.
Yeah. And then I started, and we started a business around selling software to building departments, which is a terrible idea.
Yeah.
Because then you're still selling. I mean, so selling into government is very hard, and selling into local government also different than state government.
Yeah.
But so we were selling into local governments, building department software.
Yeah.
And it was it was a really difficult road to hoe.
I would imagine that it's kind of, you still have that, hurry up and wait. It's like I build all this software and then I've got to wait for a year or two. I mean, I hear those sales cycles of 18 months or longer.
Oh my gosh, if you're lucky. Yeah.
So I can see where that's like, okay, we're going through this burning. Not only are we not moving fast, we're burning through this cash, kind of staying open and trying to get these contracts through. So I could.
Yeah, it was a really hard time. And so that one. So what did happen was that business eventually led to BuildFacts, where we figured out that we were gathering all of this building permit data, and no one had ever gathered it before.
Right.
And we're like, holy smokes, this is actually super interesting, about additions, remodels, new constructions, demolitions, pools, all this kind of stuff, plumbing updates. And so we began to see that there was all of this data there. And that's actually how BuildFacts ended up starting, sort of in the out of this one began this new one. And again, with the lens of time, that was actually a really goofy way to start that business.
Right.
Because we fell in love with this data source rather than falling in love with the customer. And so we actually went way out ahead of ourselves. I mean, talk about burning money. We went way out of ahead of ourselves and started collecting all this data and figuring out how to do that, and never had the right customer engaged, right? And we never knew, and we thought it was named BuildFacts. I think there might. I don't think I can get a cease and desist anymore. So it was like the idea was to be Carfax for real estate.
That's, as soon as you started telling me, when I was reading the show notes as far as BuildFacts, I was like, is it a fax machine? Is it Bill?
Yeah.
Like that's the thing.
It was Carfax for real estate.
But then as soon as now you started saying these remodels and all these things, I'm like, it's Carfax for real estate.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
So I got a cease and desist from Carfax. Just stop saying that, because I got quoted in multiple national journals for saying that. And I called them and I was like, oh my gosh, I'm so sorry. Please don't sue us. We don't have any money. Like there's nothing to take. and I will stop saying it. And I was like, and could I come hang out with you?
Oh, nice.
Because we really do want to build that model. And they were like, yeah, okay. And it was amazing. And they totally talked to us. And what we found out. So we wanted to do this direct to consumer product where, hey, you're getting ready to, if you would buy a report for your car,
right,
for $15 or $20, whatever, would you buy a report for your house? And that was the original product. And it never sold any. I mean, I think that we tried to give it away and it just never, ever took off. And as we're doing this, we're actually talking to the folks up at, maybe I shouldn't say their name again. Then I might actually get it right. So we're talking to them.
We're talking to them.
So we're talking to them. And they're like, yeah, so you need like $100 million. That's how much money you actually need to go reach the American consumer. I was like, oh, I don't have that much money.
You're like, could you write us a check?
I have like $1. I mean, how much can we? We were so
startup land.
Yeah, we didn't have any kind of money, and so we, so it was really so that version of the entity was flawed from the very beginning.
As far as the B2C market,
yeah, the B2C market was very flawed, and but it was still like this amazing data set that nobody had ever been able to wrangle to the ground. And we, and like I'll be damned. We were so good at wrangling it, right? We were so we were able to mine this data, and we started getting, more and more and more of the country, because we had to get, so there's 19,000 building departments in the United States. So compare that to property tax data. There are only 3,000 counties for property tax data. So, so it's an order of magnitude bigger. And so but we got really good at gathering all this data. And unfortunately, we did not get very good at gathering a customer for that data for kind of a while, and it took us some time to figure out who the actual customer was.
How did you finally figure that out?
Desperation. It was Desperation. That's what it was.
But I mean, this isn't an uncommon problem, right? Yeah. And even like the cease and desist to, hey, you want to have a distribution discussion, right? Like that. I feel like that's not a totally unheard of move. But what does seem interesting or different, right, is how you actually figure out who that customer is once you have this.
So we started putting a lot of lines in the water, right? We tried, we started, looking at banks or, who touches real estate, right? Realtors, which was 100% unsuccessful.
Right.
And so we eventually started doing a couple of experiments with insurance companies, right? Where they would send us some addresses and we would send them back everything we knew. And the product that we sent them back was so incredibly unfit for purpose. It was like they sent us an address and we sent them barf, right? And just like we would send them these dossiers that were, essentially like maybe 100 pages long for a commercial.
Nothing sorted or organized.
Right. And all the while we were like, this guy working great, right?
Check.
You seen this? Have you seen how
Our
good
report
this
is so long.
It is so long, right? And we are like out of money. And we had a funder at that point, which we can talk about, but we had a funder, and the funder is also like, man, you guys got to turn the corner. Right. And so we are up against the wall. And so I found out about this insurance innovation conference that was happening at Barton Creek Country Club.
Okay.
And I say I found out about it because I was not invited. And so I put on like what I thought you wore, to that kind of. So anyway, so I went, and I decided, I was like, I'm just going to hang out and like see if I can talk to anybody.
Right.
And later on that afternoon, there was a woman there named Kathy Smith who, she was like, oh, I didn't see you in the hall at the lecture. I was like, oh yeah, I was in the back. Anyway, so she said, oh, I was meaning to get back to you. We actually looked at your reports, and do you want to know what we do with them? Yes, I would. And she said, oh, well, they're way too long, but we just like look for this thing and this thing and this thing and subtract this and that, add this, and we come up with a roof age. And I was like, a roof age? Why in the world do you care about roof age? And she is like, hey, and she calls a guy over who is the head of claims for a top 5 insurance carrier. Mm-hmm. And she says, hey, last year, how much money did you spend on roofs? And he starts what would have to be bleeped out.
Right.
And he's like, I spent $7 billion replacing roofs last year. And I was like, oh my gosh. And so she was like, yeah, Holly can tell you how old every roof in the United States is, which we could not. And she says that. And you
didn't deny it. You're just like,
oh yeah, I didn't let it lie.
Maybe.
So we start going through all the, and so there's like a crowd, and this is from deep desperation, right? Like, cause we're on our last pennies, and so I get a stack of business cards with people that are like, yeah, I want to know roof age. And so I got in the car and I called my co-founder and business partner, and I was like, okay, I got it. This is how we do it. We do it like this, and like they subtract this from this, and they take this number here, and they do this. And he is like, we can't do that. Have you lost your mind? We don't do anything like that. And he just tells me all the things that are wrong with this way that we're going to do this. And so I drive home, and I come in the front door of my house. I'm just crying.
Right.
And Andrew, my husband, is there, and he's like, ooh, and
what's going on?
Yeah. He's like, let's get you a bath and a glass of wine. I was like, yeah. And so I just cried and just was like, that was it. That was the pass That was the move that we had, and it's done. So he calls me the next morning, like 6:00 in the morning. He's like, I did it.
Your co-founder.
He did. And he had done it. And he had done a bad version.
Right. You always do. The first version.
But he had done a version of it. And we called every single person back, and we ended up with everything changed.
Wow.
And the whole philosophy around the product, and we realized you have to build a product for a customer.
Right.
And just the whole, everything changed. It was, and it just, it's so funny because I can feel it in businesses, and when I talk to founders now.
Yeah, I was going to say, this is not uncommon.
Yeah, you can feel it man, they don't want your stuff, man. It's not there yet. It's when they call you back.
Right.
When it's really a there, and then it changed, and it became a slide, not a ladder. And it just was, it was a very palpable shift. And we started just growing and started adding more products onto that, and then adding, obviously, the other thing with the insurance industry, God love them, we had a yes there from that same guy that was in the top 5 carrier. It took a hard yes, and we were literally meeting with his staff the next week, and it took us 3 years to get the first check from them.
Wow.
Yeah. And so thank goodness there were some other smaller carriers that were not so
slow.
3 years.
Wow.
And so it was very
complex.
Yeah. It's a uniquely challenging thing in prop tech businesses, though. That's not, 3 years is a really long time, right? But to infiltrate some of these big organizations and have good adoption of your software, it doesn't match up nicely with VC funding all the time.
No, and we didn't have, we had, it was sort of venture and sort of PE. So we had a big investor that had that long view, which we were really thankful for. And even when we came up against, but they knew that we had that timeline.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And so when we were in that really hard part to find funding as we were figuring this out, as realtors aren't working, as B2C is not working, we ended up talking to, and it was the worst, most awkward thing, because you talk to somebody like a partner maybe, and then you'd be like, do you have money? Do you invest in companies, right? Because it doesn't put you on your front foot, to be sort of in partner discussions asking about that. And there was one company, RMS, that were like, ooh, we don't, but the guy who invested in us does. And that was a guy out of London, Lord Rothermere, who owned the Daily Mail.
Oh.
Yeah. That Daily Mail money. And he had a venture arm that was sort of venture and sort of PE, right? It wasn't so, it was also sort of a permanent fund. It didn't have, the fund 1, fund 2 dynamics kind of thing. And he was great as an investor. There was one point at which, when we're in these long contract crunches, when we needed some more money, and he gave us a $10 million line of credit with a handshake. Yeah. And that we would use in payment, and that was this growth capital so that we didn't have to raise more money. Yeah, it was, there's not many investors that can do that. We eventually papered it. It wasn't always a hand.
Yeah. But you needed it in a pinch.
And we did that. And that was amazing. But it was very non-traditional. That was very I don't think you think ooh, I need money for a prop tech business. Let's call the folks over at the Daily Mail.
Right. And
it's more like if I had a weight loss supplement.
Well,
maybe I would call people.
Especially because it's so far out of what you think they would invest in, right?
But they loved US data businesses and prop tech businesses and stuff, and so it actually turned out to be a perfect fit. But yeah, it didn't make sense from the outside.
So cool. I love stories where things just don't make sense. And it's like, okay, so in this case, Carfax is calling you, and I can say the word. It's like, it's like, stop using our name, and you're like, okay, but can you help me? Or
can you tell me about how you made
and they're
this
like,
journey?
Yes. Like, who would have thought of that? This is some really, really cool things.
You gotta ask, you gotta knock on the doors, you gotta, and there are very few things that lead you to do that like desperation and passion for what you do. And
that was the other point I was going to make, is that this is a common thing I'm seeing over and over and over with entrepreneurs and startups is, necessity is the mother of all invention. And there's a reason for that saying. It's because at that point in time, you're like, what do I need to do to make this work? And you have to think outside the box and ask people different things and say yes to things and send. It's just a wonderful story. I love it.
Yeah, we ended up selling products into the largest hedge funds, the largest banks, the largest government institutions, all that kind of stuff. We ended up that's how it ended up being. So we ended up, by the time we were sold, we had 84 billion data points on the largest asset class in the world, which is U.S. real estate.
Wow.
It's not the stock market. U.S. real estate
it's
is
multiples of the size.
So the largest, we had a data set about the largest asset class in the world.
Wow.
And then we were predicting, we predicted housing starts 3 weeks before the U.S. Census did, all that kind of stuff. So we got, once we figured it out, we were good about creating, and we realized that nobody wanted to read a report.
Right.
They just, and so it was all data to data, it was all computer to computer interactions. And sort of also late in that cycle, we had an outage, right? And so it's all, we're never sending someone a report, right? We're only, they're pinging our system to ask for data. Right. And we went out for 2 hours. And during that time, we took down about 60% of the U.S. insurance industry with us. Wow. Yeah, it was very bad.
Wow.
And also what? It was an amazing sort of.
It's an interesting validation.
Yeah,
right?
yeah. I didn't realize
terrible at the time
that when this many companies call you, it was. And thank goodness it was only a 2-hour outage, but they were so reliant on the data that we had baked into their system that we later went to on-prem
wow.
data sets.
Wow. So we've heard so far navigating complexities until this point, which is amazing. And I love the story. And I know there's many more details to that story. And maybe we'll grab coffee at some point and I'm going to hear the rest of it. But beyond that, you said sell. And so you've sold the company. What is that? Can you walk us through what that looks like? When do you, things sound like they're going really well? You've got all these points. At some point, did you think sell from the very beginning, or how does that, can you walk us through that process?
So I think that to start a business that you have to put your life force into it. Because I think that when you treat it as this, when it's over here, it never gets the breath of life. And so somebody, and hopefully a couple people, literally you breathe life into it.
Right.
And so that for me was very personal and I really loved it. And selling, when we came to sell, it was not, I don't know that I was ready, right? The investors were ready. The market was ready. There was lots of interest. We had lots of inbound interest, and I don't think that I realized what that would actually be like until after it was done.
Oh, I see.
And it was very.
It's not something that you started and say, I'm ready to go sell. It's all. It's people.
It's more like the universe came to me on that one. I wasn't so strategic. It was been waiting for these exact market conditions to do this. It was not like that. It was like, hey, a lot of interest in this. Prices are doing really well right now for these type of data businesses. Let's go do this. And then you hire an investment banker, and then they make a pitch deck of a company that's so beautiful you don't even know it's yours. It's like, wow, that's so pretty.
Yeah. Oh, we're crushing it.
Yeah, and it's very different. So it's like in raising money earlier, for venture, you can. It's very okay for you to say a bunch of I don't knows,
right?
That's part of what's to be expected.
Right.
But then when you're actually selling a business, they'll ask in May 3 years ago, your revenue went down 0.5%. Can you explain that to me? Right. And you have to have an answer for absolutely everything in that business. Right. And so getting ready for that was really hard and long and very uncomfortable for me.
But you knew this going in. The investment banker prepped you for this, or
Yeah. We did things like, I mean, we did pitch practices and stuff, and where we had friendly audiences, unfriendly audiences, like practicing going through all this, and
got it.
Yeah, and it was very emotional, and so you're like, and so we had, I think, 170 some odd people that were interested in the business, more than 20 companies that made initial offers, that winnowed down to 12, and then we had, somewhat of a bidding at the end that down four companies that were interested. And in hindsight, the people that stayed in the longest were actually our partners that we had invested time in, that knew how good of a company that we were, and were really familiar with our product and how committed we were to it. And so it was actually those people that stayed in the longest. The economic buyers basically got outbid by the strategic buyers.
Got it.
Yeah. And so I'll say this, in the complexity realm, we sold the business to Verisk, a Fortune 500 company that was a fantastic home for the business. Okay. And I knew I could not operate the business inside of their universe. And so I handed the business off to my very capable COO for him to run it and inside and do like the transfer and stuff. And so I did, like, so the day that they bought it, he became the leader. And I was like, so I would ask him, I don't think I've ever been a micromanager. All of a sudden, I was the worst human being. And so I'd be like, hey, did you follow up on this piece of the contract about this thing here? And did you do this? And did you do this? And did you do
like, leave me alone.
Yeah. And he was like, stop it. And I was like, oh yeah. And then I didn't, and I kept doing it. And then he was like, no, really? Like, you have to stop.
How did you know that you couldn't run the business inside the acquirer?
Like the freedom? I mean, freedom is not the right word, but like the
dynamics.
Yeah, the dynamics of like that if it needed to go this way, I knew that I could do that. And I didn't, and I had a great relationship with our board. And so, I knew that I could move it the way that it needed to be moved, or negotiate contracts. Hey, we're going to give this person a great deal because they're the first people to buy this and stuff like that. And when you're absorbed into a big organization, you don't get that latitude anymore. And so I knew that I would
kind of tying your hands back.
Yeah. And I didn't want to do that. And so he was doing it. And so then he told me to stop. And then I started going around his back. Because I knew everybody, right?
Yeah.
And I was like, hey, Valerie, did y'all do this thing? And then they would tell him, and he was like,
obviously,
you have to stop. And I was like, and I couldn't, and I kept on doing it. And then one day, it was 3 months later, I woke up and I was like, oh, it's done.
Mm-hmm.
And I had this feeling like it was the greatest book I had ever read. But I read it, and I read the epilogue, and she's done. And I never asked again.
Wow.
And like I would ask about like, oh, about your kids or about right, but I never, like, no, it was done. And it just, I don't know, it took that
time. Yeah, it just,
or something. Well, and then it was just done. And I loved it, and it was in my past.
Thank you for sharing that, because, entrepreneurs out there, me being one of them, and having conversations with others, the emotional connection that you hear all these, read the books and stuff, don't get emotionally attached to that, but you do. You get emotionally attached to your baby, and it's like you're gonna breathe life into it, and you're gonna make it happen and create it and do things, and then at some point it's this detachment, and it is an emotional thing.
Cleaving. Yeah.
Well, it's also, though, I mean, it's funny because you've now told two stories, and I think this is like the hallmark of all entrepreneurial stories, where you have absolutely no idea how you're going to get through it, and somehow you do, right? There's like this moment where you're like, I don't even know what the option set is, right, for various paths, and then you're like, oh, I'm going to go to the Barton Creek Country Club. I'm going to sort of, figure this thing out. It's the same thing in a sale process, right? And it's without that level of emotional connection, I think it's almost impossible to like do that stuff.
So you're saying this podcast isn't going to work?
What do you mean?
Because you can't explain how you don't know what you're going to do and then you do it anyway.
Well, that's what we're trying to do, right? I mean, that's
like, I don't know.
That's why it's going to take a few episodes. We're not going to get it done today.
So you're hoping for some sort of pattern recognition after a while?
I think so. Yeah, because I see it everywhere. It's like, man, I don't know. I've heard like the saying, all good deals die 3 times, right? Yeah. And that's really true. And I think it's often said as a resiliency point, but I think really, at least for me, I take it as a like, complexity issue of just how to figure out what to do when you don't know what to do.
Is it complexity or resiliency?
I think it's both.
Yeah. Like, how do you keep your...
I think it's a question and answer thing, right? It's a complex situation you're running into, and that resilience that you answer to that complex issue.
How do you keep your wits about you when everyone is losing theirs?
Yeah. Well, and I think part of, my goal for the podcast is there are those out there that we're mentoring through this process, because hearing this story, they're calling their own conflicts at the moment, right?
They're got to stop using their name.
Well, they can send us a letter.
Okay,
it's a podcast.
Forward it.
It's a podcast. It's media. We're not selling anything.
Dear Matt, please enjoy this letter.
Forward.
Yes.
But there are people out there that are facing some of these same issues, and they're in that point. That are like, what do I do now? How do I do this? Is this? And so I think some of the things that I know I personally learned from is this your experience. And so that is how you navigate some complexities, by listening to how others have done it, and know that there's no rule book. There's no like, follow these steps and you're going to have a successful startup and this and that.
I hate those people. I like have deep resentment to the people that come around and have like this, or like
5-step system,
and also like these entrepreneurs that were like, I was such a strategic genius that I came up with all this stuff and figured out all this stuff.
Just lying in hindsight.
Yeah. And it's like, well, then that's not useful because I'm not that genius.
Right.
Yeah.
And it's
also not how it happened.
And it makes you feel bad and like a loser and stuff. And so I actually don't like the word mentor, because I think it kind of has some of that old connotation of, I'm going to tell you how to do this. And instead, like, I like to be co-travelers.
Okay.
With people, right? That we're all in this journey, this entrepreneurial journey, and let's be co-travelers on this road together. And because that feels more realistic to me, where I can tell you about, I'm a dipshit, and so are you, right? And we're going to try to figure it out together.
Yep.
And that I'm going to learn from you, and you're going to learn from me, or maybe we don't even learn anything. Maybe we just like have a beer and laugh about how hard it is.
Yes.
Yeah, I feel like I always say that like almost every bit of human information that's ever been learned has just been learned from somebody who knows just a tiny bit more than you do, right? And it's like they just have a little bit of a head start, and so they can save you some time and trouble, and that's very valuable, right? It's sort of all you can ask for.
I tell my daughter that, it's these gray hairs, all they are is cheat codes. I'm just going to give you a few cheat codes. That's all it is. Like, take it or leave it. They're just things that I've been through, and, just a little bit before you. And I've seen that, done that. You want to go this way, it'll happen. And so I think it's interesting. I've never heard that resistance to the word mentor. I have another podcast that's all about mentorship for Gen Z. And it's because that's not as prominent of a word or thing these days because of social media and everything else. But back to your point about so much marketing that happens on social media about, I've got these 5 steps and this and that. That's not what I consider, a good mentor. A mentor to me is someone that's just like done it before me, or even same age, that they've just done something different than I have, and I just want to learn from. So
that's what I mean. They just have a tiny bit more experience in one thing.
You messed up more than I did, and how do I learn from that? So that failure is something that I really love learning from, because that's how we learn.
I think that I think that social media is the great cancer, the cigarettes of our age. And I think it is impossible to know your own mind when you're so filled with everybody else's. And it's not true, right? Those Instagram moments and stuff like that, like nobody's saying the truth.
Right.
And so that it's such a
except when we put clips of this on the social media. This will be true. But I understand 100%. And I agree. We certainly talk about that a lot because it is. I like how you said it. It's the smoking of this generation. It really is. It's the cancer of this generation or this age that we live in at the moment. And so we've got to find a solve for that because it just does. And I 100% agree with, it keeps your mind in this shallow space versus deep thinking, right? Which is what we need. We need to exercise that muscle to do some deep thinking.
Like, what makes me happy? What is it really? What actually does fill me with purpose and joy, and
it's not doom scrolling.
Yeah.
It's not that.
It's funny. I somebody recently said this to me, and I thought it was an interesting distinction that there's kind of 3 layers of attention. You have distraction, entertainment, and art, right? And they all demand a little bit more of you. And so their point was like, think about a TikTok or a reel versus an episode of The Office, right, versus some great film, and think about like the level of effort that you have to put in them. And I thought that was an interesting way to think about it. It's almost like a food pyramid, right? Like spend more time in the art and less in the distraction, and moderate amount in the entertainment or something like that.
That's a really good mental model.
I thought that was good.
I like that. That's really nice. Okay, and you said you've done this not only once, but you sold 2 other companies.
Yeah, but they weren't good.
Let's not talk about it.
They led up to that, and so we had been building businesses and stuff, but they weren't the big dog that BuildFax turned out to be. And then since then I've also founded other companies that are on their own journeys as well.
What is it about founding companies, or what is it about this entrepreneurial journey that you think, like that was one of the things I was going to ask to begin with, because you're like, I went from government work to startup. There's something there. I mean, I just want to make that connection. Like, did you have entrepreneurship in your family?
My dad. Yeah. My dad was always an entrepreneur, and was very inspirational for that for me. Absolutely.
Got it. So
it's wonderful.
It makes a whole lot of sense. You see the world a lot different when you have those kind of influences from. So
my husband has also become my husband is an engineer, and he's become an entrepreneur. And I remember one day, he was just, I think dudes do this in ways that I'm not sure that women do, but he was just cussing. He was just like, right?
Oh yeah,
right?
Yeah, the self mumble.
Yeah. And I was like, what's the matter, baby? And he's like, nothing, just like, thinking about going to work or what. And I was like, oh, like what's the, and I was like, oh, you can take a left turn. Let's start a business. And he was like, yeah, like we can do that. And so we started a business together that he now runs, and it's doing great.
Nice.
Right. And that new thinking from mumbles. So he was able to take a leap there and like learn, because I think it's a very learned skill. I talked about that before. So
question regarding the sales, any regrets? Like, do you wish you would have not sold, or is this like everything was supposed to happen and close to the end of the chapter, move on? I don't know, that doesn't occur to me. Okay. I mean, what purpose would that serve?
That is such an entrepreneur answer.
Right.
Yeah. Just like onward.
Onward,
right?
forward.
Yeah. It just doesn't occur to me to think to regret it.
Okay. Very cool.
Like it feels like you asked me, like, did you do a painting of it? Well, no, I hadn't thought about that. Like, why would I do that? Like, that doesn't have anything to do with it.
You're like, I don't need a painting. I've got this beautiful presentation that they made for us.
Why would you engage in that?
So how did you decide what to do next? Right? Like you sell the business, you're inside Verisk. What was going through your mind to figure out, kind of next steps, whatever not necessarily even professionally, right? Like it might be different than that.
Yeah, it's funny because I think that there's a fantasy that there's going to be this like infinite free time or something like that, and this is going to be so wonderful, and you just have like this infinite freedom, and I, as entrepreneurs do, we talk, kind of like, how did you, do it, and when you find that, how lottery winners, if they're unhappy before, they're unhappy after, right. And if they were happy before, they're happy at, right?
Yeah.
Entrepreneurs are the same thing, right? If that's what they were doing before, that's what they're going to do again. They just end up doing it, right? You just,
a different question, but kind of going the same. Did you find a different purpose? Because it seems like for entrepreneurs, we latch onto a purpose, and this is my mission, this is my purpose in life, until it isn't. And then, is there a transition time? Is it 6 months? Is it a year before you find a new purpose, or is it just kind of like, I'm just kind of happy and dealing with life at this moment?
So I had a conversation with a friend that was very illuminating about this. That she's very young and very wealthy. And she has this idea of her highest value is freedom. Or that's what she wants. And then she was struggling with purpose. And I was like, I think you're screwed. Because if your highest value is this ultimate independence and all this kind of stuff, all of the purpose that I find is the things that I obligate myself to. Right. And it's in those obligations, it's in those commitments that I actually end up finding purpose. Right. So like, what's the ultimate one? My commitment to my husband. Right. That gives me enormous. And then my children. And then these projects that I work on, that actually is what, like, that's what gives me purpose. And they're not, and I'm not going to say like, well, I've decided to, end dog homelessness or something like that. Like I haven't. Right. It's not that. It's I like finding problems.
Got it.
And surfacing them, and then working on them, and seeing if there are ways to move those problems forward and get paid for them. Right. I enjoy doing that. Okay. And that commitment and the obligation is actually, for me particularly, and I think for most of us, it is that obligation in which you find happiness or purpose, and then purpose leads to, I don't know, it can also lead to a lot of misery, but it is where you find the joy to be, right? The life, the tapping into the source.
Okay. I was curious, and I wanted that question because you hear so many people that achieve a goal, and there's countless stories of athletes that get the gold medal, and then the next day they're just depressed, right? And so, that was the where I was leading with that question. I was just kind of curious if any of that. You said it beautifully. You closed the book and you were done. There's no.
Oh, and depressed. Sorry. I just didn't leave that part. Was my Instagram post not clear about that? Like, I closed the book and I was happy that I read it. But I wasn't depressed. I felt bereft. Yeah. I felt like a limb was missing.
Really?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I absolutely felt that way. And I remember like waking up like, oh, got stuff to do. Oh, you don't. And like that feeling that was a big clue for me that like I needed to go obligate myself, to go out there and go begin.
Yeah. I think there's this, I like this idea that happiness, it's from Aristotle, but happiness is a virtuous activity pursued with excellence. And that's sort of been my observation when you take the entrepreneur's work away, right? Is that it's not that like that was the be all and end all. It's not that they're a workaholic. It's that they're what makes them happy, and what makes everybody happy, right, is their own activity that they love to do, right, that they push themselves to do really well.
I want to do it with people and be a buddy, and then you kind of go and do some stuff, and like it works or it doesn't work, but you're moving forward. And I don't know why we think that it wouldn't be that way,
right?
Like, or the naivete that you think that that once you finish this, that you're not going to still have all those impulses to go swim better or lead better or whatever. It's still.
But it's also funny because you didn't say, well, I had this great idea that, struck me in the head, right? Like it's more about how do I sort of get back into the figuring out process to identify the idea. Is that
I very much see it as a trade rather than a innate gift or something like right. It's a trade, and you go work at your trade, and you go and you get skills, and you just put you make the bricks and you put them together and they work, and like it's just an investment of your effort, and then something begins to sparkle,
right?
And then it sparkles more, and it begins to coalesce around something.
Right.
But like with BuildFacts, like it didn't coalesce for kind of a long time.
Right.
It sparkled, but it didn't quite do that. And so like to figure out how to, this is a very hard question, to be honest. Like if you do find somebody that's got like a 5-step program, I would be interested.
I've never encountered them.
Well,
you notice that reference you got, it's been dead for 3,000 years. It's my best response. Like, that's all I got.
And do we have to pursue it with excellence? Can it just be like pretty good?
Pretty good. Yeah. Craftsmanship.
Yeah. Can we just have like
yeah.
Well, there's just some individuals that, you go build one, sell it, and go build something else. They just like have to be building something new. And I really love that you are sharing a different perspective than that. You're like, yeah, that was great. And it was a piece of me. It's like a limb. But then I'm also just this kind of joyous person. I can find that in family. I can find that in all these other things. And I think it's beautiful. Yeah. I really do. I think that's an amazing way to, it was not what I expected. How about that? Because as a founder, I'm always, as many entrepreneurs are, you're always looking for a problem to solve. Mm-hmm. Like, how do I solve that? Oh, the bigger, the better, but then to be able to have peace at some point, say, I'm just solve something really big and I've got time that I can go do some other things that find me happy. So I'm still doing problem solving, but not in that capacity, in another capacity. Now it's family, other things like that. So there
can be like in entrepreneurism, there's like a sickness around some of that hustle culture,
right,
too. That's sort of like it's got to be so big and so fancy and always that. And I feel like that's real gross.
Right. Same.
And I think that comes from some of that that you
Same.
talk about, like the I'm always
right. Yeah.
doing something so AI or whatever.
Well, it's
blockchain,
But what is true about it, right, is you do waste an enormous amount of time, right? And you don't know what time you're wasting in the moment, right? Or at least that's sort of been my experience. And so it's almost like, I agree with you, but I also feel like the hustle culture, like to some extent, you do kind of have to show up, but not in that way. You know what I mean? Like it's sort of, I don't know. I don't want to throw the baby out with the bathwater and like give the impression that you don't have to show up to the Barton Creek Mall, right?
Yeah.
That's a pretty or not the mall,
it was a country club, but like it might
that's
well
a pretty hustly thing to do, right? Which you kind of had to do, but and it worked out. But but I agree with you. It's like you don't have to be this.
What is the distinction there? I don't know exactly what it is, but there's a piece of it that's absolutely true, and then there's a piece of it that's just so gross.
Yeah, totally. Yeah.
Well, and this may or may not be that, but there is a hustle period when, and I call necessity, mother of all invention, right? Mm-hmm. When you're there, you're in it, you've got to do whatever you need to do to make it happen. But then I think the distinction is once you've over that hump and you've got, the next steps of the business, you don't have to be at that point anymore and kind of live in that mentality. And I don't know if that's the distinction that we're talking about or not.
I don't know. I don't think it is.
Okay.
It's because I think you still have a motivation. I don't know. I feel like we've lost the thread. That's okay.
And that's perfectly cool.
Was that when we do the read? Can we redo that entire thought? Let's go back.
Let's go back.
20 minutes.
No. I think this is. It's wonderful because we are exploring, right? We're exploring from and learning from each other, and I really enjoyed this conversation. I had one other question.
Hit me.
And it's not going to be a hustle question. It's going to be about you after what I've read and what I've learned about some of the things that you've done is after these experiences and maybe it was all during as well. I just can't imagine having the bandwidth for it. But then you leaned into work with philanthropic companies and of that nature. Like, could you just walk us through like some of the things that pulled at you and what you aspire or what you get from doing that kind of work?
Yeah. I mean, I would say that it goes back to this idea that like, I feel so one of the groups that I work with, I serve on the board is Just, and we give loans to women entrepreneurs, mostly women of color. And we've given like 10,000. And what we really provide is community.
Got it.
Right? So it's the community, it's the education, it's somebody to talk to about what do I do? It's like this, right? It's like this. So there are all these women meeting together about their businesses, how to move them to the next step. I mean, and it's women, that we might give like a $2,000 loan to, but she's got all these women, rooting for her and helping her figure out how to do this. And she goes and creates, a business at the flea market that ends up, with, 3 stalls, and she's doing it right. This just incredible growth. And that I feel like the worst thing that social media has done is it's taken all the words about good and it's made them it's like reduced to them.
Right.
Can't say community.
Yeah, right. I was like, how can I say what this really feels like? It feels good in my soul to be a part of that and to help that organization move and create this movement that is changing lives and creating wealth for women that didn't have a pathway to wealth before, where they are owners of their businesses in their communities that are growing that I don't know, it gives me chills. I'm sure social media has taken that one too. but yeah, and
I
then
can see us creating memes of all these clips.
Yeah.
And then I also, one of the things that we do as a family, and this is going to feel like such hard virtue signaling, but moving on.
Do it. It's a friendly
So
audience.
we every month we cook meals for 90 people in foundation communities. We do it together as a family, and we go in hand, and so we go down to, and so we support a foundation community that's mostly filled with older folks.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of times, I don't know that they've been out of their apartment, and they recently housed or or housing uncertainty. And we go and we give them this meal once a month, and it's like to have this experience that we're all made in God's image, right? And that just like, hey, good to see you. Right? And just good to see you. And here's, we made
Just
this
being human.
pot roast, and it's super good. We made it at our house. We're bringing it here. I'll see you next month. How you doing? And like, there's this one dude that tells me a dirty joke every month. And like, they don't even make sense all the way. And just like, but I love him. Like they're kind of, and he's just like, and he's valuable just like I'm valuable.
Right.
And that's enough. I don't know. Maybe are we purpose hustlers? Maybe. Do we need too much? Can it just be simple? Of just like, man.
That sounds pretty simple.
Yeah, you and me, and I'm just like, and that can be enough.
Yeah, I think you should.
Like I love that. I find a lot of clarity in that notion that we're all dead in 100 years.
I read something the other day on social, actually, and it was something.
You read it in a book.
I read it in a book. And it says something like, we're a ghost in a meat suit riding a rock around a fireball. Fear nothing.
Dude, yes. Right. I mean, like that's it.
It's like, it's as simple as that.
Like getting out of your own head in that way. Have you ever heard that David Foster Wallace, What's Water thing?
Yes.
So there's these 2 fish, and they're swimming along, hanging out, chatting. And an old fish swims by and says, "How's the water today, boys?" And they're like, "Yeah, whatever." And they kind of keep on swimming by, and then one turns to the other and goes, "What the fuck is water?" Right?
Yeah.
And that's what I feel like it is. Like we get so in this that we don't even know what we stew ourselves in. That we get so caught up in the other stuff. So once a month, I cook a meal for 90 people to remind myself that that's just as real as anything else.
Human connection, community. I love that.
And it's sort of I think it's a good reminder that, how should I say it? The connection, or like the value that people can add is, Rick Archer said this when he was on, that preaching the obvious is often the best way to add value. And I feel like a lot of people, it's like if you help an entrepreneur, right, who's a first-time entrepreneur, like it doesn't actually feel like a lot of work from your perspective, because this to be true. You've made that mistake. You've done this a million times. And I think there's sometimes this tendency, or like something like cooking a meal for a bunch of people, right? You discount the effort, but the value of it's, a lot higher. than maybe it seems.
Yeah.
I was in Florida at a conference a couple weeks ago, and they brought in a nonprofit that does this amazing work, similar to what you're describing, as far as the feeding of communities. And the president of the nonprofit, she came up through that, and she was on the other side and shared her story. And what touched me the most of her story, I mean, this was a big touchy story, but what kind of impacted me was the human dignity of just having someone look in your eye and consider you human. So if you're giving to homeless or food or whatever, just know that just even giving them something and just looking them in the eye and just, that right there was more important to her than the actual money or whatever. It's just that human connection. So when you were sharing what you just shared, it reminded me of her story, and it's true. It's us having impact. It's us, again, being on this rock together and making decisions that really is how we love our neighbor. This is part of the work. So thank you so much for sharing. I don't have anything else. I think you had any other remaining questions?
I don't think so. Did we miss anything?
I have so many notes.
You have so many notes.
You don't know the dirty joke he told me last time?
I was going to ask.
So he says, this wasn't that dirty. What do you do when you're riding a horse and a cheetah comes up behind you, and then a giraffe comes up beside you?
No idea.
Yeah, and you get your drunk ass off the carousel.
That's pretty good.
Yeah, it's great.
I love that. Anything else you want to share? No, that was
Happy to be here.
Wonderful ending. I so enjoyed the conversation and just knowing more about your journey. It was amazing.
Thanks. Happy to be here.
Thank you for tuning into this episode of Navigating Complexity. Holly Tachovsky's journey is a testament to the resilience required to transform challenges into opportunities. Her story of innovation, learning from failure, and balancing purpose with pragmatism is one we hope resonates with you. Don't forget to subscribe and leave us a review. And share this episode with someone who'd be inspired by Holly. Until next time, keep embracing the complexities of your own journey.